Value Coffee Talk podcast.
Hi, I'm April Morley, co-founder of Genius Drive and the Enterprise Value Collective.
And I'm Tom Pacello, the ROI guy.
This podcast is a service of the Enterprise Value Collective, a community for business value-focused leaders and practitioners, and is sponsored by our value consultancy, Genius Drive.
And our mission is to help accelerate and optimize the value articulation in each of your customer engagements and throughout your customer lifecycle. And to help us do that today, we've got Michael Ketchmere. He is the head of business value consulting and ISV partnerships at sales performance management firm Xactly. He is a veteran pre-sales and consulting services leader. And we're here to talk to Michael about a top issue for 2024, and that is value realization. In fact, when we did our last Enterprise Value Collective meetup, and we asked the group, what are you challenged most with? What are you needing to address the most in 2024? And the answer was value realization. That was the number one challenge that everyone was looking to address. Michael, why is this so important in this coming year?
Yeah, I think it's the confluence of a few different factors. First of all, you think about, I'll just cut to the chase here. It comes down to retention and renewals, right? So as you know, we live in a subscription-based economy today. I'd say that if you talk to any sales rep, they'd probably tell you that selling is as difficult as it's ever been, at least in many of their careers, right? And so a lot of sellers are focusing more on selling to the install base than net new customer acquisition, right? And so when if you think about, I guess the other big factor here would be the change from growth at all costs to profitable growth. And I think when you put those two or three factors together, what ends up happening is for any business application owners, business process owners who are leveraging subscription-based solutions, the call comes at time for renewal. It's not just, hey, how do you like that app? Should we still renew? How many people are using it? But what type of business impact is that investment making for our company, right? And if you can't answer that question in a way that resonates with the CFO or finance, you may be at jeopardy of losing that type of solution. And so that's where we know value realization is absolutely part and parcel to getting to that finish line and having that effective conversation.
It sounds like you've made quite an investment in building up value realization capabilities at Xactly. How has that been going, and what challenges have you run into along the way?
Yeah, great question there. Yeah, I've been here at Xactly in this role for about 4 years now, and I'd say two or three things come to mind. First and foremost, for folks that haven't been doing value realization, there's definitely a change management aspect to things, right? So we've got a pretty strong culture here. We've had some leaders in some departments who have been doing their thing for 15 plus years. So they've got their processes well honed. So you bring in, a new person like myself who wants to do things a little bit differently and maybe take some ownership of some post-sales processes that typically run a little different way. And there's some, angst or agita around, making that change. At least for me, I think the second part is concern over required expertise. So in our world, for example, a VR engagement, VR for value realization, I'll probably say that a lot here, so I apologize, but can be pretty straightforward or it can be extremely challenging. So for example, on the easier side, we sell an intelligent revenue forecasting solution. Tom, I think you're probably familiar with that space. April, you probably as well too, right? So in that situation, a lot of folks are looking for some of the key KPIs might be things like improved forecast accuracy, better pipeline coverage, improved win rates, shorter, sales cycle times, less discounting. And in our application, every one of those metrics that I just mentioned, it's on a dashboard and it's tracked month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter, right? And so ourselves and even our customers can actually get to the realized value without much effort. On the flip side, though, when I think about the incentive compensation management solutions that we have, in some cases, it actually could require someone with more of a data science background like yourself, April, to actually come to the quantified causal impact of what these solutions had on, let's say, revenue lift or, P&L performance. Mm-hmm. So again, that for many folks is daunting enough to say, I don't think our organization has the requisite skills to be able to pull off VR, right? And that's an understandable objection. I think the third point would be, I think, Tom, we were talking about this earlier, but just everyone in general seems to be being asked to do more with less. And so when I think about value realization, again, a lot of times folks like myself would look to like a success organization to scale that potentially. But those success resources also, in many cases, have taken a hit, right, from an investment perspective. And they were being asked to do more and drive CSAT and NPS and a bunch of, and CX in general, right? And so to add the burden of value realization engagement to their portfolio also seems, quite daunting.
Yeah. So, Michael, when we're dealing with customer success in particular, who are the ones that are often having these renewal conversations, we want to arm them with the capability to be able to help us with value realization or do the value realization. What are some of the things that you worked to put in place with those resources so that they can do this? So did you catalog, like, for this solution, here are the KPIs that you should be measuring kind of before and after? Did you put in place kind of a new QBR, or instead of a quarterly business review, maybe a quarterly value review presentation or framework?
Yeah, great question. I think maybe just to even take a step back from that, what I have found the most success with in my deployment of VR with our large organization is trying to meet folks in the middle where they're at. So, for example, with our success group, they, like a lot of organizations, leverage a solution off the shelf. In our case, it's Gainsight. And so I built out, with the help of some resources, extension of Gainsight to leverage the success plans that our success managers are already using, but to have value realization capabilities within that. I'd say additionally, I've taken a layered approach to deploying and implementing value realization processes and the supporting tooling and content. So, for example, in our world, we look at value realization in 3 layers, kind of a crawl, walk, run. And so, if I think about a success manager, some of those folks are more relationship oriented, some are more analytical oriented, right? And so for the folks that maybe, the financial aspect of VR is a little daunting, they can start using this framework that I've created called the SOAR framework. I think somewhat similar, a lot of overlap with your growth framework, but they can start off using that framework, and they don't necessarily have to have an MBA or a Wharton, degree and a management consulting background to get started, right? So I think, in this day and age, as I think we were talking about a little bit earlier, VR, I think, has morphed a bit, or I think successful VR is a little less focused on the, the ROI metrics, whether it's NPV or IRR or, the ROI percent itself, and more about the, the storytelling, the outcomes to drive just focus, alignment, and advocacy for both, the internal champions and the buyers who want to promote the successes that they had, as well as for the vendor who wants to tout these things at time of renewal.
Yeah, Michael, one of the things that we found is that the companies that did implement more of a pre-sale model for post-sales value realization, where they were getting to the ROI, the IRR, the NPV, and the really wanting to see that distinct before, after full business case, most of those organizations backed off of that, and they've gone to more of this storytelling, simpler approach, like what you're advocating. Interesting. Why do you think that's the case? Customers seem not to ultimately need that level of detail and scrutiny post-sale.
I would agree. I think, I mean, one of the things that I've observed, and again, if you're a practitioner as well, I know both of you are, it's oftentimes the folks that are reviewing the business case pre-sales, it's a completely different group of folks that are the folks that are engaged in, value realization conversations and care. A lot of times, even the economic sponsor on the post-sales side may be an executive from a completely different line of business, right? And so, again, to them, how you justify the solution, that's I want to say spilled milk under the bridge, right? But that's past is past, right? And so we're more focused about, hey, let's make sure that we're getting the value that we need out of this investment that we've already made, right? And so it becomes a little more, again, focused on typically driving the business outcomes that are sought by those leaders and stakeholders, and again, less about a specific ROI percent number or some hurdle rate that had to be accomplished to make the decision of investment trade-off amongst 10 or more different investment opportunities.
So you were saying earlier that some products were a lot easier for you to get automatic ROI metrics and results, and other products were more challenging. So how did you work to implement automation across these different product lines?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so actually, my function has moved since I've been here at the company, which I think is part of the story. So, initially I was brought in under the sales arm, and that's pretty, I think, classic for a lot of value orgs that get started off. I've since transitioned. This was probably a couple of years ago into the products org, and I'm now in the product strategy function. So, it's less about me exclusively focused now on supporting sellers and their deals and pre-sales, and now it's more about thinking about value more holistically across the customer lifecycle, almost like a chief value officer would. And so, I spent a lot of time working very closely with product management, with post sales, success, marketing, and it's a much I'm used more broadly across the org than by just a subset of the go to market resources. Right?
One of the
That's
things that
interesting
you
to be in
mentioned.
product strategy because we haven't heard that quite as often. So, how did what was the experience you had moving from sales into product? And why do you think product specifically allows you to have that broad view of the organization?
Yeah, I think when you sit in the sales organization, you are kind of beholden to supporting the CRO and downward, and so you spend, at least in my experience, 90+% of your time supporting value assessments and sales reps. Right, when you get moved
Mhm.
outside of the sales org, again, I still certainly support the sales org, and it's still probably at the top of my priority list. But now I've got product marketing, product strategists, product managers, again, customer success, even support, other folks that are, again, a lot of these folks are post sales in some cases, or the product factory itself, who want to invoke and leverage value content, value stories, value realization metrics into their decision making framework, right, into their content. And certainly when it comes, you think about the product life cycle. I mean, why do we build products, right? We build products to deliver value for our customers, right? And so I spent a lot of time actually just this past year alone in kind of guiding and working with our pricing and packaging folks to make sure that we're taking, where appropriate, a value-based approach to our pricing models, which again is probably something you wouldn't do if you were solely focused in on supporting new deals for sellers.
Yeah, completely agree. And this concept of a chief value officer is one that we're making, that the time has come for that comprehensive, everything from marketing to sales to consulting to customer success, ultimately to product and pricing, and managing across that life cycle and orchestrating all of that is definitely this kind of chief role. You mentioned, Michael, the SOAR model that you've got for storytelling framework and how it's similar to what we thought needed to be put out there, which is, look, when you're running these quarterly business reviews or quarterly value reviews, you really need to tell a story. GROW for us stands for goals, reiterating what are the goals of the project? Have they changed? Which ones have been implemented? Which ones haven't? How's the rollout going?
Yeah.
Which has been the traditional role of customer success communications in the QVRs. What are the outcomes, the quantifiable, tangible outcomes, key performance indicator impacts, and quantifying some of those into dollars? And then importantly, like the subjective wins, the qualitative feedback of, I can't live without this. My job has changed. My ability to service customers has amplified. What does SOAR stand for, acronym wise? SOAR, I think it is.
Yep.
And how does it align?
Yeah, no, very well aligned. I think everything you mentioned is part of my SOAR framework. I think the main difference or tweak that I started with was probably the S in SOAR. So again, real quick, SOAR is S for situation, O for objectives, A for what actions did you take, and then R for what results. So
Mm-hmm.
very similar to the GROW model, right? Almost one for one. For me, I think the one, I think, sizable potential difference would be just my extra focus upfront on the situation. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, what I find is even if I was involved in the pre-sales value assessment efforts, when we get into the post-sales value realization conversation, a lot of times the players have changed. And so it's worth
Absolutely.
me taking the time to revalidate the what was the prior current state? What was going on? What were the challenges you had then? What was the cost of that current state in the absence of the solution like ours, right? And making sure that all the new people that might be involved now have that fundamental understanding of where they're coming from. I think the other benefit that has for us is when it comes time to tell the story afterwards, right? So the SOAR, I think, would be a little more aligned to the, as you know, Tom, right, the dramatic storytelling arc, or which is
Absolutely.
overlap with challenger sale, and it's not starting with the value or the benefits or desired outcomes, but we're starting with the client's world
With the
first,
pain. Yeah.
right? With the pain,
What
you got
got them
it.
to move and motivated them? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, very similar as I think you would probably agree.
Yeah, the G definitely gets into the what is the pain that you were
Okay.
looking to solve and the impact of it. Totally. So couldn't agree with you more. You've got to start with that and almost repoke at the pain, especially because they might not have them all solved yet and might not have implemented all of the use cases that you want them to implement, or you may wind up identifying a couple more that they've realized.
Absolutely. So yeah, just like, when I start off a meeting on the sales side, I'm going to start off with, here's my understanding. And before I go any further, hey, tell me, do I have that right? What am I missing? What's changed since last time we spoke? So like you said,
Yeah.
having this conversation also opens up some opportunities to identify some additional value opportunities that might lead to another type of, life cycle
Preach.
engagement.
So, what are some of the outcomes that you've experienced by implementing value realization in Xactly?
Yeah. I guess I'll start with maybe what I've seen over the last, let's say, quarter or so with this new grow model. So, it's first and foremost, it's given me the ability to better scale, the process and the function, right? So, I've seen a lift in for example, the KPI post sales metrics and benchmarks that we have populated in our value realization repository. So, that growth over the last quarter. Definitely have seen an uptake in volume and speed with which we publish with collaboration with marketing, what people would refer to as case studies or success stories.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's even less about, the volume of those, but it's more about that the actual content in these stories has more quantified KPIs, metrics, financial impacts. So they're much more impactful for the sales and marketing engine. I think the other big piece here is just it goes to scale, but it's the time and effort with which we can enable now new practitioners in the field. So what used to take weeks or even months to get someone to be able to do a value realization engagement, I now think about that in literally hours or days, depending upon, again, the challenges that come with what's involved in that engagement. But to go from days, hours, from weeks and months, it's been huge, and being able to do more with less, as again we're all trying to do.
Absolutely. What's the one piece of advice, Michael, that you'd like to leave our enterprise value collective with today?
Yeah, it's funny, Tom. I think we've spoken in the past, and I feel like just my top of the cuff answer is the same one I had before, and it's get started right away, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're not thinking about value realization, again, some of my counterparts, they've almost focus almost exclusively on the pre-sales value assessment side. And I would say if you're not doing VR and you don't have the edict from leadership, doesn't mean that it's not coming, right? Because at least I've seen it. And again, as we mentioned earlier on this call about just the focus on renewals and expansion and cross-selling, you've got to have the VR metrics if you're going to be able to support those types of calls to action for your existing customers. And then I would say, tied with this, you need to think a little bit outside the box, be more creative, right? So again, the traditional mindset is I bring in someone with a Big Six background, or maybe they ran VR at SAP or Oracle, and if they think they're going to come in and bring on 10 of their folks that they had from their prior team, it's just not going to happen, right? So how can you do more with less? And I think the great news here is there's still a lot of go-to-market resources out there that are, in seat already. And so I think it's less about owning the resources, more about like enabling resources that maybe you don't own, but you can definitely direct and help elevate them in their careers, which is, goodness for both the individual and the organization.
Yeah, Michael, totally with you. I think being able to shape the story and put together a storytelling framework, being able to identify to the pain points and the goals the customer had, what are the KPIs, and getting started with those two could be great. And you don't have to solve it all at once, right? Just get started with it. And I think if it's not in your charter today, it really should be as a value leader. And you should be maybe grabbing that initiative and getting it to be a part of your charter, because the renewals, the upsell and cross sell, the ability to retain and expand, it's probably more important to the business over this next year than it is to actually close new customers. And it's at least an and, if not a plus. So
that's right. Completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us and sharing your experience with the Value Coffee Talk podcast audience. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure, April. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, please sign up for the Enterprise Value Collective if you haven't done so yet. You can do that on LinkedIn or on our geniusdrive.com website. Let you stay in touch on the latest events, tools, insights. And if you haven't yet, hit the like button. If you liked what you heard from Michael, subscribe so you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. And until next time, our Enterprise Value Collective, keep sharing and growing together.